most of you guys won't know this, but about 5 years ago, I actually went out to Indiana to go to a trade school to become a farrier or a horseshoer. And first off, I'm going to talk about why that really didn't work out as a career for me. And then we'll get into what a farrier is, what does a farrier do, and I want to talk about this box, my homemade farrier's toolbox, later on in the video. So first off, let's talk about why it didn't work out for me. So to start, at the time I was dating a girl who had horses, and she really got me into horses, and they're really cool animals. I really like to have horses again someday. That's really why I'm keeping the box. But also at that time in my life, I was doing a lot of blacksmithing, working with hot metal, and I was really into it. You know, doing the welding and fabricating, which I still do, but I don't do as much blacksmithing as I used to. I thought, man, this would be such a cool career for me, working with horses and hot metal all day. So I decided to, start looking for farrier schools, and I picked the one in Indiana for a couple reasons. There's only one in Indiana, which you can look it up if you want to. This school, it's basically, the guy only takes maybe 4 or 5 students on at a time. And it's a lot of great one-on-one instruction, and you really get a lot of experience. You get under a lot of horses, and that's what I really liked about that school. There's a couple other schools throughout the country, but a lot of them are really commercialized, meaning that you'll have 25 to 30 students and maybe 2 or 3 instructors, and with those schools sometimes you'll be lucky if you get under 1 head of horse per day per student. As where when I was out in Indiana, I mean, we were up at 6 a.m. and we were going for there were some days we were going for 8 hours just trimming nonstop. You could get under as many horses as you wanted, and really being under a horse, that's really where you learn. I mean, sure, you do learn a lot in the textbooks, but really getting under there, nailing on the shoes and trimming the hoofs, in my opinion, that's the best way to learn, by doing. So that's why I chose that school. There were a lot of good things about that school. There were a couple things I didn't like. I really don't like to talk badly about the guy. He was always very fair with me. Really great guy. He opened up his workshop to me. I was doing some work on my truck at the time, and just, hey, anything you need in the shop, feel free to use. Just make sure you put it back in its place. So I really do appreciate the hospitality he showed me, but we view differently on quite a few things, and that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, so overall, I had a positive experience out there, but after going through the school and coming back home and, trying to get into the industry, what I found is that I wasn't as interested as I was before I went to school. Some things you'll do at home and in the shop, like welding, for example. You do it at home and it's a lot of fun, but when you have to go out there and do it every day, well, sometimes it becomes work and it's not as enjoyable to do. So that's part of it. And also, while I was out in this school, every horse you get under is going to be different. And the mentality of the instructor of the school was, I need to put these guys under some crazy wild horses, so that way when they go back home, they can understand how to manage these horses and how to safely trim them. Well, I can tell you right now, there were probably 4 or 5 instances where I almost got kicked in the head or trampled. So there is a lot of risk with that job. If you can find a bunch of horses that are very calm and mellow, and you have no problem trimming and shoeing, that's ideal. That's what all farriers look for. But when you're approaching a new horse, you really don't know what to expect. So there's a lot of risk in this job. In fact, I remember one instance where I was removing the shoes off these. I think they were some Pertrons, some big drafty horses, and I unfolded the nails. So, obviously, when the horseshoe goes on, you nail the nails through the hoof wall, and you bend them over to kind of lock that shoe on there. Well, when you're taking off the shoe, you have to unfold those nails. So I unfolded all the nails, had my hand in the wrong spot on the hoof, horse yanked, ripped my hand open. I remember the instructor saying, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to quit, or are you going to, wrap it up and finish up the job and feed your family? And I wrapped up my hand and finished up the job, but I was like, it's a bit dangerous. Very dangerous job. Now, I don't mean to sound like a little girl here, but it can be a very dangerous job, especially when stepping under a horse that you're unfamiliar with. And when I was at this school, I was taught a couple of techniques that are almost abusive, and these techniques are used to cause some physical pain to the horse, which I don't really agree with. And that's supposed to show them like, hey, I'm boss, I'm top dog, you need to listen to me and you need to calm down. So a couple techniques I was taught was, first off, this was the most humane one. You know, you just back the horse up. Horses don't like to back up, so if you make them do something that they're uncomfortable with, it's supposed to show them like, you know, I have control of you. And if they progressed even further than that, we take their leash, the little buckle, and we jab them up in the throat and the bottom of their neck, which I hated doing that, and that's just how we were taught. I never did this, but there was one horse as well who was really acting out, and the guy basically gave him a real good roundhouse kick to the gut, and it worked, but I really disagree with it. I think that's not the right way to train animals, but you know, everybody has their own opinion. So if a horse owner had seen that, I feel like he would have been fired in an instant. With most people. Some people are probably okay with that, but I wasn't too keen on his training techniques. Another reason that I kind of didn't continue with this career is a lot of farmers, hay farmers specifically, will agree with me here, but a lot of horse people, it can be very hard to get paid. You know, if you have a farmer who drops off, you know, 20, 30 bales of hay, sometimes they have trouble getting paid. It's the same way with farriers, so I don't know. I hate chasing people for money, so the combination of what had seemed like a really good job and career for me in the beginning, it didn't work out due to the fact that, you know, very dangerous, you have trouble getting paid, and it just wasn't as fun as it was when I first started out. So, you know what, it's fine, it didn't work out for me, but I'm so happy that I went out there and I took the leap, and I really had a great experience out there, and just stepping out of my comfort zone and learning a trade. So I'm definitely happy I did it, but just didn't work out. Alright, now I'm going to start talking about my homemade toolbox that I made while I was in school, and I'll talk about some of the tools and their basic uses. So one thing I did really pick up on, and I really liked that my teacher taught, was he taught us how to be cheap but not sacrifice quality, such as making your own toolbox. Why not? Save a couple $100 making something like this as opposed to buying, you know, a top-of-the-line aluminum box, so all for that. So one way he taught us to be cheap was when it comes to hoof knives. This is a hoof knife. This is one of your basic trimming tools for trimming the sole or the inner part of the hoof. And this one is a cheap hoof knife. This is probably $12, and you know, you start getting in the more expensive hoof knives, you know, they get upwards of $30, $40, even $50. And he taught us that some of the main differences are the comfort, how they fit in your hand, and you know, stuff like that. I agree partly, but I also feel like the more expensive hoof knives have better quality steel. You don't have to sharpen them as frequently, but anyway, he basically taught us that you can customize these handles, which of course you can, but he taught us, you know, you could take a torch and you could burn these handles. They gives them a cooler look, a bit of a different texture. You can sand them down, put some linseed oil on there. In fact, you can take a rasp and kind of roll over some of these edges here, so when you grip this hoof knife in your hand and when your fingers bend over, it gives you for a real comfortable grip. So I was all for that. Another way he taught us to be cheap, obviously, which I just mentioned, is making your own Farrier's toolboxes. And this was made out of 3/8" plywood and just some, I think we used liquid nails and just a couple finished nails to hold everything together while the liquid nails cured. But my box is a bit unique. It's not like the sample boxes they had in class. So the sample boxes just had maybe, you know, 6 or 7 little cubbies, a little spot on top like my box has for, you know, just various tools and nails and whatnot. But I wanted to add a couple unique features to my box. So the first thing I did to my box that the classroom box didn't have was I added a bit of an overhang with the plywood on the top here. And what that allows me to do is when I go to lift up this box, because it's almost always on the ground, I can wrap my fingers around this overhang, and it gives me a really good place to hold onto the box, and my fingers aren't going to slip off, and I just have really good control of the box. So that was a little thing that I wanted to add to my box. Secondly, the classroom boxes didn't really have a good place for your rasps. Basically, they had them with big cubbies like this, and you know, flopping around a little bit. So I decided to make compartments that go sideways in the box. And the advantage with this is this goes all the way down to this corner right here, so you get the rasp as far into the box as possible. And I don't know, I just thought it was a good idea. It worked out well in my eyes. So one of the most unique features about my box is it has this little section right here to house your hoof knives and loop knives. So you can have a couple knives just hanging out here, because in the classroom boxes, these knives were just kind of floating around on top of the box, hitting whatever, and you know, you put a lot of time into sharpening these knives. You want to keep them sharp, so by having them in this little holder right here, it keeps the edges of the knives away from each other and they stay sharp. So I thought that was a really cool feature about my box. So let me start talking about what's in it. So, you know, when we're horseshoeing, well, first off, I'll say, you know, we try to keep these boxes as light as possible. You don't want to take more tools to the job than what you need, because, you know, you always got to pick up this box and move it around, especially when you're not working on the horse. You don't want the horse to step on the box. So I just got kind of everything piled in here for right now. So when we're shoeing, obviously keep some nails on top of the box. This tool, this is used for bending nails back over. So I mentioned earlier in the video, when you nail a shoe on a hoof, you nail the nails up and then you fold the heads over. And in order to take the hoof off, you need to bend those nails back over. So you take a little chisel like this and you kind of hammer this up and unfold the head of the nail, so that way when you go to pull on the shoe, that nail just pulls right out of the hoof wall. So I got one of those. Normally I'll keep a set of dividers up here, a little sanding finishing block. So I got a little tape measure, which that's another thing, you know, sizing the proper size horseshoe onto the hoof and getting that horseshoe to conform to the horse's hoof. It takes a lot of skill and it takes a lot of practice, and there's, you know, hot shoeing and cold shoeing, and you know, there's a lot to it. So I'll continue on with the tour of the box here. So again, you have a section for your knives. So this is just a basic hoof knife, and again, this is really mainly used for the sole. You can also use this for trimming the frog. Right next to my hoof knife, I have my loop knife, which is just looped. And most commonly I'll use my loop knife for trimming up the frog, which the frog is kind of like a little V structure in the middle of the hoof, and it's really kind of like the cushion of the hoof. Alright, next we'll move on to my hammer. So this hammer is obviously designed to nail the nails on into the shoe through the hoof wall. And then after you nail those nails all the way through, if you'd like to trim the tips of your nails this way, you can take this hammer, go over the point of the nail, give it a little twist, and that just takes off the excess of the nail. By the way, how much do you think this hammer costs? Please let me know in the comments section below. I'll tell you who's closest later on. Next, here we have a nail puller, and this thing can get you out of a lot of trouble. So, all right, so here's a shoe. Now, for more amateur horseshoers such as myself, when you're nailing on a nail, it's important that you nail that nail just right. If you nail it too shallow, it's not going to grab enough of the hoof wall, and if you nail it too deep, you're going to go into the sole, you're going to hit blood, it's going to hurt the horse. So it's very important that as you're nailing the nail, you want to check with your fingers and just kind of gauge by how deep the nail's going, and make sure that it starts to come out of the hoof wall when it should. And fun fact, the harder you hit the nail, the quicker it'll kind of curve out. So sometimes us amateurs will nail a nail and it'll be too deep or too shallow, and this is a great tool. So what you do, you go in here, you kind of clamp down on the head of the nail, and then you can pull that nail back out and you can try again. So this tool can be a lifesaver. You can also use that for removing stubborn horseshoes, but typically when you're removing horseshoes, I use a tool like this. So obviously you unfold all the nails, and then what you do with this tool, you come up in here and you kind of get this in between the shoe and the bottom of the hoof, and then you give it a little twist like this, do the same thing on the other side, and then this will pretty much, shoe should just come right out. If it doesn't come out, you probably forgot to unfold the nail, something like that. So you can also use this. I use this for clipping the heads of nails sometimes, and also when you're setting nails. Some guys will understand that if you've been around a farrier before. Here we have a clincher. So oh man, this is a lot to explain here. So after you nail the nail up through the shoe into the hoof wall, and it's still pointing up, what you need to do is you need to fold that over to kind of lock that nail in. So what this clincher does is this basically takes the nail that's coming out of the hoof wall, and this goes on the bottom of the shoe, and it basically folds that nail over, and then you can finish off the nail from there. So this is really just to pull those nails and fold them over and make sure that that shoe stays on there. So that's the clip. Alright, now we'll move on to the nippers, which I used to have a really good set of GE nippers, which GE are kind of like the top of the line brand, but my ex-girlfriend still has some of my Farrier tools, so I had to buy a cheaper set. So if there's any lawyers out there that would like to help me in recovering my assets, please let me know. But anyway, nippers are just basically like oversized nail clippers for horses, and you just kind of clip around the hoof wall, and you want to make sure you do it flat, and you don't want to go in too deep, and you know, there's a lot of skill to it. But basically what you do by using the nippers is you try to minimize how much you use your rasp. That's what I was taught. You want to try and cut off as much of the big stuff you can with nippers, because that'll save you a lot of work with the rasps, and rasps are expensive. What else do we have here? Right next to the big nippers, I just carry a set of mini nippers, which these are great for doing donkeys and mini horses because their hoofs are a lot smaller, so I'm able to get in there with this smaller head and nip the hoof, which very commonly when I trim minis and donkeys, you know, they haven't been done for a while because people don't ride them regularly, so they get pretty long. So a tool like this really saves me a lot of work when it comes to the rasp. Now, if you notice, I keep two rasps in here, and that's the way I was taught. You want to keep one rasp, kind of like a cheaper rasp or an older rasp, and I normally start off filing with this. And excuse me, by starting with the older one, the dull one, if I hit a little rock or pebble or something that I missed when I was cleaning out the hoof with this, well, I don't really care that much. If I were to hit a rock or pebble with my good rasp, then I would be a little bit upset because that'll just dull down my good rasp quicker, and I want to keep that one sharp. So I have a dull one and a sharp one. Also, you know, if there's something sharp on the horseshoe or something like that, then I'll use the dull rasp, especially when I'm finishing up with a horseshoe and I just want to take a little bit off the shoe to kind of match the hoof wall a little bit. I'll use the chromie rasp. And then in the bottom of the box, I just have a bunch of horseshoes sitting in there for now. But another thing I normally keep in the box is just a wire brush and a rag. And that's pretty much it. Alright, and that pretty much concludes today's video on my homemade Farrier's toolbox. Some of the Farrier's tools that I have and how they're used. What else did we talk about? We talked about what it was like at Farrier School a little bit, which I can do another video specifically about Farrier School if you guys are interested. And also why it didn't really work out as a career option for me, which I'm completely okay with. I'm really happy that I got to experience that. And that's, you know, that's the thing. There's two things I want you guys to take away from this video, especially the younger guys who are in high school, kind of going into college. First thing is, make big decisions in your life and make them frequently. Going to Indiana, going to Farrier School, into this whole new place that, you know, I never had been before. It was really uncomfortable for me. It was really taking a huge leap into the unknown. Because, you know, I've always been at home and just going to school in Indiana knowing nothing about it. It was really a big decision, but you know what? It was really hard the first week, but after that, it was really a great experience, and I'm really happy that I got to experience that. And the second thing that I want to say is, you know, today so much scrutiny is placed on kids and young adults to go to college and get a degree. Well, I can't tell you how many friends I have that go to college, get bachelor's degrees, and yet they're at ShopRite, you know, checking out people because they can't find jobs in their line of work. So never rule out trade schools or construction trade schools, automotive, because, you know, those jobs really are in demand right now, and a lot of these jobs you can really make a really decent living. Like, I know when I was going to Farrier School at the time, I had asked a couple of Farriers what they were making, and there were some guys making upwards of $100,000, even more when you get into more specialized corrective shoeing and stuff like that. So, you know, you don't have to get a bachelor's degree, but learn a trade. Do something with your life. So, that's enough rambling on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.